we finally have confirmation of a new Nintendo system coming out later this year. Let's talk about it. Let's go! Hello everyone, it has been a really long time. I'm Josh from Lintendo channel, and yes, I know it's been a little while. It's actually been about 2 weeks since this has actually been announced, but yes, in a recent investors meeting at Nintendo suggested that they actually announced that there's going to be a successor to the Nintendo Switch coming out this physical year, either late 2024 or early 2025, within that launch title. And yes, I know I am late to the party, but I just kind of want to talk about my expectations and the general Nintendo's expectations of the next system. So, while I don't know Nintendo, we know how they operate and like how they work and what their expectation would be. And I think also just our expectations in general of what we want to see in a system. Not even want to see, but our expectation that Nintendo is going to do for the next system. So yeah, as the title of the video suggests, these are the expectations of the next Nintendo Switch. So let's go. I think first and foremost, the next Nintendo system has to be similar, because I think they really hit it out of the park with that form factor. Now, is it the newest form factor? No. Even in the early stages, portable computers were sort of a thing, and Nintendo kind of just, I wouldn't say ran with it, but with their gamepad, they were like, you know what, let's just make it as a system. So I think when they did that and they revealed it, a lot of other companies like Aya Neo and a bunch of like Odin and Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, those handheld devices kind of kicked off and started this whole movement of powerful portable PCs. Because of that, the demand for a portable powerful handheld is still pretty high. And what does that mean for the next system? Well, it means that you need more powerful graphics. So in this case, they need a better chipset, they need more RAM and more storage, because with either of those things, if they want to attract the next generation, you're going to have to make things a lot better. All the points that I'm going to be talking about are all related to each other. It all comes down to one thing, is how are we going to feel about the next system? Is it worth the upgrade? It has to be completely worth it for us to go buy the next system. Yes, they have their Nintendo fans, and regardless, most Nintendo fans were probably going to buy it. Well, probably less because the Wii U absolutely flopped. So because of that, they really need to have a better chipset so that we have better games, the games can run a lot better, and also because of third-party developers to be on board, you know, along with more RAM and storage. And obviously the partnership with Nvidia is really important to Nintendo, because without that technology, I don't think they would, you know, be in this position. I think if they were to compete, the next Nvidia chip that's going to be on Nintendo Switch has to include DLSS. Now, if you don't know what DLSS is, it's basically AI upscaling for games. So on basically in a hardware level. So for example, a game that can run at like, I don't know, 480p. So say for example, a game that is really high intensive graphically wise, if it were to run on the current Switch, it probably wouldn't run at all. But if they had DLSS, they could probably put that game into say 480p or less and then upscale it to 1080p. That actually might work, and it'll actually work well and could have better performance, at least to much better performance. Because if they had that, they could compete with the current systems. Now, do they want to compete with the current systems? No, they don't really need to. But in this case, if they're going to try to pull away people from other systems, they kind of do need that. They need power. And no, they're not. I don't think they are trying to go in that route, but I think if they were going to do something like that, they need to have a better way to make sure that it's worth the upgrade. And also another thing, with that upgrade of the chip means better security, because we all know what's happening right now with Nintendo Switch and piracy. It's become one big giant hole that has opened up because of the MIG switch. If you don't know what that is, that's basically a flash card for Nintendo Switch, and you can essentially dump your Nintendo Switch games and play it on an actual like cartridge and then put it in your Switch and play it that way. That kind of just opened Pandora's box for anybody to come in and just download games and not pay for any other games or whatever. So for Nintendo, they know that piracy is a huge issue for it. So obviously with the games and the graphic card chipset, they need to make it harder to hack and make sure that the games are not easy to access through the next whatever the Make Switch or whatever it is. So somehow they need to do something with that. I don't know how it's gonna work, but I know that Nintendo has to do that to combat that. Do we want it? Honestly, not necessarily, but it is what it is. That's the way the Nintendo wants to operate. And I think the next thing that they have to focus on is really continuing their third-party relations. There are a good amount of games that are third-party on Nintendo Switch. Actually, way more than half of my library is third-party games. As you can tell from right back there, that's all of my Nintendo Switch games. Like, I have basically almost all the first-party games, and then a ton of third-party games. Now, I think they need to continue to keep that relationship going with third parties and make it easier for them to develop games for. And that kind of goes back into the more powerful chipset. The more powerful chipset, the better way that you have better performance, the more that they'll be willing to port more games and higher quality or more current games to the system, or even develop their current game onto the system. Because a lot of the ports that we've seen on the current Switch have been games from 10 plus years ago, or games that were somehow in a miracle run on a Switch, like Doom 2016 and The Witcher 3 and The Outer Worlds, Payday 2, NBA 2K and stuff like that. And surprisingly, there has been no Madden game on Switch, which is kind of surprising, but it is what it is. I think they don't think it's worth it to put it on Nintendo Switch for some reason. But if they do have a better chipset, more powerful chipset, more RAM, higher storage, I think with the way that things are going, I think they would be more willing to put their current games that are being developed, or even just games within the last year or two, onto the system, because it makes more sense that if you have a more powerful system that could run your game, you're going to want to put it on a system that is going to sell a lot. Well, assumption is selling a lot, because with the way the current Switch is going. The next point I kind of want to talk about is going back with the improvements to the physical. So I think there needs to be improvements with the controller. So obviously the Joy-Cons were the Switch won. The next Joy-Cons have to have an improvement with their sticks, because if they want to avoid a lawsuit, they are going to need something that doesn't drift, because that was a problem within 2 years, or at least a year or two, on the current system. Now, a lot of people actually do use their Joy-Cons a lot. So if they present an option to them that's going to be better, you better make sure it's going to be really, really durable, because that's not going to pass this time around. Because I think that was a major turnoff for a lot of people, just to have a controller that'll work, and then if they continue using it within 6 months to a year, it'll start drifting, and people don't want that. But also another improvement to the Pro Controller I'd like to see would be analog triggers. That would be a really cool thing to have. I don't think they'll actually do it or not, but if they want to make an improvement to it, I think adding analog triggers would actually do a better job at, promoting more games that use those triggers, better for racing games, better for more games in general. Now, do they need to do it? No. That should be a consideration for Nintendo to have better usability and just to be more friendly with everyone, with developers and consumers. So ultimately that goes up to Nintendo. And another thing that they should add, 4K dock. I really don't understand why they didn't have a dock that went up to 4K. That was just kind of a dumb move on the Switch OLED's part, that they never decided to do 4K. And I think it was capable to at least output to 4K, but that's Nintendo. But I will say this, more powerful chipset, more RAM, more storage, DLSS, 4K dock has to be easily accessible. Now with the screen, I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that, whether it's going to be a 1080p screen or a 720p. That's up to Nintendo. I do hear rumors that it's going to be an 8-inch screen, so I'm not sure if that's true or not. Now we did get a better screen size with the Switch OLED, so that was a nice thing. So we'll see if they do an increased size for that. Now the next thing on the agenda really is having a similar chipset And obviously, we kind of already covered this a little bit with a more powerful chipset, but if it's a similar chipset to the last one, which was the Tegra X1, the next chipset I think has to be very similar so that, again, development is easier for the developers and just makes it a lot easier for them to port games or put games over and develop games for the current system so that they don't have to outsource all of their work, and also make even Nintendo's internal developers have an easier time to develop the games for, because right now they're currently developing games for the Switch, but whatever the next system is, I think that if the chipset is similar and the compatibility with their engines are the same, I think the development time, although it's going to be a bit longer because of how much better it's going to be, the current games that they're currently making for Switch will be a lot easier to port over, will be a lot easier to, make improvements to an already established game. For example, Breath of the Wild, I've heard rumors that whenever they showed off the next system, that Breath of the Wild ran at 4K 60 or something like that when they showed it off to investors and third-party developers. Now, again, that's a rumor. I'm not sure if that was true or not. But we'll see. We'll see. That has to be easier for developers, because at the end of the day, well, Nintendo doesn't need developers as they have done so in the past with with their older consoles. I think a better relationship with third-party developers is definitely a good thing to have, because that could present you more options, and that presents more people to buy third-party games and take a look at the system. So that goes into another point that I want to talk about, is that the expectations for the sales, I think Nintendo will definitely want to have it on par with the current Switch, if not in terms of total sales better than the current Switch. But I think that expectation is going to be really hard to meet, because Nintendo Switch was something that was like one-time thing, a one-time gimmick sort of thing. They're going to try to follow it up, but it all depends on the consumer if they want to upgrade, essentially, and if they think it's worth getting the next system. Because although it is similar, how many casuals are going to be like, oh, the Nintendo Switch, I already have one, why do I need to get the other one, Or for parents that have a Nintendo Switch for their kids, they're like, why do we need to upgrade for this? They already have one. I think it's the focus for that system. I don't know if it'll be met, but Nintendo really has to do something in order to make sure that they would go over from the original Nintendo Switch to the next one. With the amount of people already having a Nintendo Switch, it's just kind of hard to justify the means to go make an upgrade. So whether Nintendo has to do something, whether to shift focus from casuals to going to more hardcore audiences, I think if Nintendo wants to capture all audiences, they're going to have to do good third-party games and current games to be ported to Nintendo Switch 2, and then also bring in a casual Nintendo game like Mario Kart 9, for example. I think Mario Kart 9 needs to be near launch window, so people will be like, oh, it's the next Mario Kart game, oh, it's the next Smash Brothers game. That'll actually get people to go and buy the system, and especially if it's going to be exclusive to the next system, that will get people to go out and buy their system. Now, for more mature audiences, I think that newer games that are being ported, and also more games like Call of Duty and FIFA, Madden, what else people play? Minecraft. I mean, of course, Minecraft is going to be on Nintendo. That's going to be a no-brainer. But there's a lot of people who play games like that, and if they're going to want to play those games on the go, I think they need to be on there. But I definitely think that there is a focus and a target for more mature games, because if they're going to add more power to a system, that means more current games that aren't family friendly are going to be on the system. So if that's the way that they're going to go for, I think that there definitely needs to be more advertisements, more marketing towards that more mature audience. And here comes another point as well: backwards compatibility. So for consumers like me, if it's going to be worth it to upgrade, I would like to at least play my Switch library on the next Nintendo system, or the Nintendo Switch 2, or whatever. And I think that's just rather enticing for a lot of people, because if they can't play their last games on there, it does kind of suck, because if it's going to be similar to the last system, wouldn't backwards compatibility make a lot of sense? And also, in the recent investor meeting, they talked about how how they want to use Nintendo account all throughout their next generation and generations after that. So I think that backwards compatibility has to be a main point for that system. So whether that means buying games digitally, having it physically, and just going forward. Now I think it's going to be a lot harder when it comes to the generation after that, because I don't think they'll do a Nintendo Switch 3 or whatever. Whatever they decide to do for the next Nintendo system, I think, again, backwards compatibility, at least through digital means, should be an option. Kind of like what Xbox has done, right? Is that they have a lot of games that are backwards compatible. You can play it through your disc, but you can just get it straight up through the Xbox store and just play it that way. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is now the multiple variations of the console. Now, I guarantee you we are going to get a Switch Lite 2 within either a year or two of the Switch 2 life cycle, because there has to be an option for people who only play in handheld mode. And like they did that with the Switch Lite on the first one, and I would say it was a sort of a success, because there are people who aren't going to get it and want a smaller form factor that want to play it on the go. And another thing that I put down on my notes was a digital Switch 2. Now, I don't think that will happen, but if they decide to do a Switch Lite 2 digital edition where there was no cartridge port, or made a smaller form factor, I can see them doing something like that. But I mean, the cartridge port really doesn't take much space at all on the Switch at all, so it really doesn't make much sense for them to do it, personally. And then another thing that I also put down on my notes was a docked-only Switch. The expectation of that is virtually none. I don't expect them to do it at all, because it wouldn't make much sense. But if they were to do a docked-only Switch 2, I would think that they would just unlock the full potential, in my opinion, try to unlock the full potential of a docked-only Switch, because you don't need a battery, you don't need to underclock the system like they do with the Nintendo Switch. You can just kind of put it on docked mode only, or even just have graphical enhancement to get better frame rates or whatnot. But I don't think they'll do that, because I think they're going to try to do everything the same, whether it's going to be the Switch 2 in docked mode and the docked only Switch. It wouldn't make much sense for them to do that, but it would present an option for all consumers, as if people are more power hungry, they just don't care about having the portability aspect, they would just get it and play it on the go, or play it in their game room or in their living room just to play the game at higher frame rates and better resolution or whatnot. But that kind of goes down to the consumer. But that being said, what do you guys think of my assumptions on Nintendo's expectations for the next Switch? Leave a comment down below. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you want to watch more of my future content. If you want to watch something else, make sure to click the in country right here. That is my discussion of the current state of video games, so be sure to check that out. Anyways, that's the end for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. This is Josh from Lintendo Channel signing out.